It started with the packing list. Something about that shared Google Doc made it feel official. We were going away for 3 days, just the two of us, and I had no idea why my chest felt like it was being pulled taut every time his name popped up next to an item. Sleeping bags, me, gas money, you. It's strange how a simple trip can change everything, but looking back, maybe I knew it even then. This wouldn't just be a weekend getaway. Something was already shifting, something quiet, unspoken. I'm Nate, 24, final year in grad school architecture. The kind of guy who notices symmetry in buildings, who sketches cafe chairs while sipping lukewarm coffee. I'm not dramatic, not loud. I'm measured, or I thought I was. Until Josh moved in 8 months ago. We weren't supposed to click. He's the type that walks into a room and everyone suddenly forgets what they were doing. Athletic, laid back, chaotic in a way that somehow never backfires. A marketing major who could charm the pen out of a professor's hand. Our only connection, at first, was timing. A mutual friend bailed on the lease, and Josh needed a place fast. But then came shared breakfasts, the Thursday laundry debates, him knocking once before barging into my room and collapsing across my bed like gravity didn't work the same on him. Somewhere in that tangle of routines, I started to notice things. The way his hand would graze mine when we reached for the same cereal box. How he always sat a little closer than necessary. The fact that I remembered his laugh better than I remembered my own. Still, I kept it quiet. I didn't let the thoughts form into words, not even to myself, until he asked about the trip. Cabin's still open, he said one evening, twisting a pencil through his fingers while I stared blankly at my laptop. You wanna go? I blinked. Just us. He shrugged. Yeah, why not? That was it. No explanation. No follow-up. Just a shrug and that lopsided smile of his, like we'd been planning it all along. Now, here we were, halfway through Friday morning, shoving bags into the trunk of his beat-up sedan. The air smelled like pine, dry earth, and whatever cologne he always wore, something woodsy, clean, and stupidly distracting. You packed the board games, right? He asked, slamming the trunk shut and tossing me the keys. Yeah, I replied, trying not to let my voice give anything away. Also brought extra socks in case you soak yours again. He shot me a look. That happened once. Man, I laughed, but my fingers trembled slightly as I climbed into the passenger seat. He drove with one hand on the wheel, the other draped loosely near the gear shift right where mine rested. Close, too close. We were headed to his uncle's cabin, about 2 hours upstate. Isolated, old wood floors, no Wi-Fi, just us, some leftovers from the last tenant, and whatever unspoken weight I carried between us. The road stretched long and straight, sunlight breaking through the trees in slanted beams. Every now and then he'd glance over and smirk, for no reason at all, and I'd feel it, that flutter just beneath my ribs. At some point, I stopped pretending I was only imagining it. There was something between us. I didn't know what name to give it, and maybe that's what made it feel both terrifying and sacred. Bet you'll miss your sketchbooks by the first night, he said, smirking. I raised an eyebrow. Bet you'll be asleep by 9:30. His laugh filled the car. Easy, natural. God, I wanted it to mean something. As the trees thickened around us and the signal bars disappeared, something inside me tightened and warmed at once. This trip, it wasn't just about hiking or card games or escaping midterms. It was about being alone with him, without noise, without distraction. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't know if I was ready for what that meant. But I wanted to find out. We met because of a Craigslist ad. Or, more accurately, because of a cancellation. Josh wasn't even supposed to live with me. My old roommate bailed a week before the lease renewal, and I was panicking. Josh showed up with a gym bag, a backwards cap, and a crooked grin. Said, if the water pressure's good, I'm in. It was never meant to be deep. We were just two guys sharing rent, a kitchen, and alternating turns on trash duty. But something shifted quickly, subtly. Josh had this way of pulling people in. He talked in half-jokes, remembered little things I said, like how I always added cinnamon to my coffee or that I hated the sound of cardboard scraping against wood. He never made a big deal of it. He'd just quietly avoid opening packages near me or pour a pinch of cinnamon into his own mug and call it a tribute. In the early days, our nights blurred together with background Netflix, late takeout, and dumb bets like who could do more push-ups. I lost, consistently. We weren't just living together, we were learning each other, and somewhere along the way, it became ... easy. He'd leave post-it notes with fake motivational quotes on my door before an exam. I'd leave snacks by his laptop when he stayed up editing slides for his marketing class. That we had a rhythm our own language. Hey, Picasso, he said the first night at the cabin, dropping his duffel beside the old plaid couch. You gonna draw the trees or hug 'em? Depends, I said, flicking the light switch. You planning on sleeping under one tonight? The cabin smelled faintly of cedar and dust, and the wooden floor creaked under our steps. It wasn't big, just a central room, a tiny kitchen, and one bedroom with two narrow beds shoved into opposite corners. Josh peeked inside the bedroom and whistled low. Wow, roomy, I smirked. They look like hospital beds, he grinned. Good. I always wanted to fake a near-death experience for attention. We took our time settling in, unpacked groceries, argued over how many blankets to use, tried to figure out how the old fireplace worked. He insisted he had a system, which involved poking logs randomly and muttering. I saw this in a survival show once. That night, we ate reheated pasta from Tupperware on the couch and watched a movie on my laptop. He rested his socked feet on the coffee table. I kept pretending not to notice when his knee brushed mine. At one point he paused the movie just to argue that the main character's outfit looked too clean for someone lost in the woods. I'm serious, he said, pointing at the screen. You don't hike in khakis, that's just criminal. You hiked in slides last semester. That was a fashion statement. Yeah, I said, trying not to smile too wide, a cry for help. It was easy, too easy, and that's what made it hard to ignore the part of me that wanted more than this banter, more than the unspoken language of glances and laughter. Later that night, we discovered the first complication. Josh stood in the doorway holding a bundled sleeping bag with a sheepish look on his face. Okay, funny story, he began. I raised an eyebrow. You forgot your blanket. Technically, yes. But I did remember beer and peanut butter pretzels, so let's not pretend I didn't contribute. Sighed, already unzipping my own bag. Take mine. I'll use the throw blanket from the couch. No way, dude. You'll freeze. I'll manage. He hesitated. Or we could share. My throat caught before I could answer. He said it so casually, like we were planning to split a pizza, but his eyes flicked to mine, and for a moment, a flicker, I thought I saw hesitation, like he was testing something. Asking something without asking. Sure, I said finally, trying to sound unfazed. Just don't hog it, he grinned. I'm a gentleman, I only steal half. The bed wasn't meant for two. We both lay stiffly at first, backs turned. I stared at the log-paneled wall, counting the knots in the wood while trying not to hyper-focus on how close he was behind me. Eventually, he shifted and mumbled, "Is it weird if I say this feels kinda nice?" I held my breath. No, I guess not. He didn't say anything after that, just exhaled and settled in, but my thoughts were a cyclone. His warmth at my back, the gentle rhythm of his breathing, it stirred something in me I hadn't allowed myself to name. Not really, not fully. I wasn't in love, I told myself. I was just feeling things, confused, maybe projecting. But when I rolled over in the middle of the night, barely awake, and found his hand resting loosely against my forearm, I didn't move. I stayed still, not frozen, just present. Listening to the quiet between us, letting the moment linger, letting myself want, even just for a little while. We woke late the next morning, groggy and stiff from a night of tangled limbs and too little space. The air inside the cabin had turned cold overnight, the kind of cold that wrapped around your fingers and crept into your bones. Josh grumbled something unintelligible and buried his face in the pillow. Your elbow was in my ribs for half the night, I muttered, sitting up and rubbing my eyes. Consider that a love tap. He groaned without lifting his head. I stared at the back of his neck, messy hair, the soft slope of his shoulder beneath his t-shirt. I wanted to reach out and touch it. IDN, single quotes T. Instead, I got up, made instant coffee, and stared out the window. That's when I saw the car, more specifically, the flat tire on the car. I didn't say anything at first. I just stood there holding the mug, eyes locked on the sagging rear wheel like it had personally betrayed me. Josh finally wandered over, yawning. Why are you looking like someone kicked your puppy? I pointed with my chin. Tires flat. He squinted. Dude, seriously, he let out a low whistle. You bring the patch kit. You said you had the emergency bag. Yeah, but that was before I assumed you'd bring common sense. We bickered for a few minutes, mostly out of habit, but we both knew we were stuck. The nearest town was over 10 miles away, and with no cell service and no passing cars, wasn't like we could just order a ride. Well, he sighed, plopping onto the couch and taking a long sip of his coffee. Guess we're here for a little longer than planned. A tight knot formed in my chest. It wasn't fear. Not exactly it. Was something closer to anticipation. An ache. A question I didn't dare ask aloud. What happens when you spend too long in close proximity to the person you've tried not to fall for? By mid-afternoon, the fireplace was roaring again, and the light outside had softened. The wind picked up, whistling through the cracks in the window pane. Josh was digging through the cupboard for snacks we'd forgotten about, and I was curled on the rug with my sketchbook, pretending to be focused. You ever draw people? He asked suddenly. I looked up sometimes. Have you ever drawn me? The question caught me off guard. I blinked at him. Why would I? He shrugged, casually chewing on a granola bar. I dunno, I just figured I have a face worth sketching. You have a face that won't sit still, he grinned. You dodged the question. I didn't answer. Mostly because I had drawn him dozens of times when he wasn't looking. His jawline, the slope of his nose, the curve of his fingers as he typed dot. Josh walked over and sat beside me, too close. His thigh brushed mine. He leaned over to look at my sketchbook. What's that? He asked, pointing to the page I'd just finished. I started to pull it away. Nothing. It's rough, dude. He laughed. You drew the fireplace better than it looks in real life. His voice was warm, full of that same easy charm that had undone me from the beginning. I wanted to lean into him, let my shoulder fall against his, but I didn't move. You're talented, he said. A little quieter this time. I mean that. His compliment landed too softly, like he didn't want me to flinch away from it. But I did anyway, emotionally at least, because if I let myself believe him, I might start believing other things. Things I wanted but couldn't have, or shouldn't have. We spent the next hour playing a card game we both half remembered, the rules dissolving into laughter and shouted protests. Then came the second complication. The power cut out, all at once. The lamps flickered and died, leaving us in a wash of early twilight. Josh froze. Please tell me you brought flashlights. I held up my phone. At 23% battery. I am the flashlight, he groaned. Okay, fireplace it is. It was dark now, not pitch black, but enough that we stuck close. Josh added more wood to the fire. I pulled the blanket tighter around my shoulders. Then he sat beside me again, this time pulling the blanket so it covered both of us, and suddenly we were cocooned in one long stretch of warmth, knee to knee, shoulder to shoulder, the fire casting flickering shadows across his face. He didn't seem to notice how stiff I'd gone, or maybe he did. Maybe that's why he stayed silent. I couldn't think, not properly. My thoughts kept circling around the way his thigh pressed into mine, the way his breath fanned across my temple, the way our hands brushed every few minutes when one of us shifted. I said, trying to keep my voice level, we should try walking to the nearest house in the morning, before it gets colder. He nodded. Sounds smart. Paused. Then, without looking at me, he said, you're weird tonight. I swallowed. What do you mean? He turned slightly, not all the way, just enough for me to see the outline of his expression in the firelight. You're quieter, like, you're thinking too loud. I laughed once, weakly. Is that your professional diagnosis? Yeah, he said, and I think I know what it's about. My heart skidded. What do you mean? Another beat of silence. Then gently, you look at me like you're scared of something. Like if you get too close, something's gonna break. My mouth went dry. I didn't answer because he was right, because I was scared of what I felt, of what it would ruin, of the truth sitting quietly in my chest, like a lit match waiting for a gust of air. And still, I didn't move, because despite everything, I didn't want to move away from him. He looked at me then, full on. His eyes were soft, searching. There was no teasing in them now, just openness, a question, and that scared me more than anything. He didn't push, he just let the moment breathe. Then he nudged me lightly with his elbow and said, let's just sit here for a while. So we did. No more words, no more space between us, just heat from the fire, and from something else that neither of us was quite ready to name. Not yet. I didn't sleep much that night. The fire died down around midnight, but neither of us moved to get up and go to bed. We just sat on the couch, wrapped in the blanket, pretending the silence was comfortable. Josh had leaned his head back, eyes closed, but I could tell he wasn't sleeping either. His breathing was too uneven. His hand kept twitching near mine. I kept telling myself this was fine, that the nearness meant nothing, that sharing heat didn't mean sharing feelings, but I also knew I was lying. Around 1 a.m., he finally said, I think I'm confused. His voice came out low, almost drowned by the soft crackle of the remaining embers. I didn't respond at first. I was afraid if I said something, anything, it would unravel the fragile thread that had kept this thing between us just ambiguous enough to deny. He shifted, turning toward me slightly. I mean, I know how it sounds, but I haven't been able to stop thinking lately, about stuff I never really let myself think about before. I looked at him. He wasn't joking. He wasn't trying to play it off like one of his usual what-if hypotheticals or late-night would-you-rather games. His expression was stripped, bare, quiet, and unsure, and real. "What kind of stuff?" I asked carefully. Josh licked his lips, stared down at his hands. "You, us, this." He waved a vague hand between us, like the space we were sharing had its own weight, and in a way, it did. "Look," he went on, "I've never called myself anything. I've always been with girls, and I liked it, but something's been different with you." He paused, took a breath, didn't look at me. "It's not just that I like hanging out, or that we get along. It's how I feel when you're near, like my brain goes quiet in a good way, like I don't have to try." I stared at him, and something behind my ribs loosened and tightened again, sharp and overwhelming. He looked up finally. "I don't want to ruin what we have, man, but I'd feel worse if I never said it." The words landed like a blow and a bomb at once. I exhaled slowly, trying to steady my voice. "So what are you saying?" Josh swallowed hard. "I think I like you, in a way I haven't let myself admit until now, and that scares the hell out of me." The room felt impossibly still. I blinked, my own thoughts clattering like dishes in a storm. I'd wanted this, dreamed of this, but now that it was happening, all I could feel was the fear of it being pulled away, of waking up to find it was a misunderstanding, or a moment he'd take back. "I've been falling for you," I said, voice hoarse, "for months." His eyes widened slightly. I laughed, nervous and tired and on the verge of something I couldn't name, and I've been pretending it was just me, that I was misreading things, that I could handle living in the same apartment, seeing you every day, and not wanting more. Josh leaned in, just a little. "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because I didn't want to lose you," I said quietly. "Because I thought you were straight. Because I figured you'd laugh, or say nothing, and slowly drift away." "I wouldn't have," he whispered. "I didn't know that." We sat there in the hush, both of us staring at each other like the space between us had changed shape. Something had cracked open. Josh reached out slowly, almost like he was afraid to startle me. His hand brushed mine, fingers ghosting along the back of it before curling gently around. It was such a small touch, but it shook me to my core. "I don't have the right words," he said, "but I know I want to figure this out with you." I looked at our hands. His thumb rubbed softly along my knuckle. "I'm scared," I admitted. "Me too," he said. "But I don't want to go back to pretending. I don't want to keep acting like all I want is to be your roommate." He was closer now. The firelight caught the edges of his face, his lips parted slightly, his eyes wide and vulnerable in a way I'd never seen before. Not in all those months of late night, cereal and dumb jokes and casual touches that weren't casual at all. I leaned in, carefully giving him every second to pull away. He in single quotes, teeting. Our foreheads touched first. Just that. The soft press of skin. His breath hitched. Then he tilted forward the slightest bit more, and our lips met. It wasn't perfect or practiced. It was hesitant, searching, but it was real. That his hand slid to my jaw, his fingers warm and trembling as they held me there like he wasn't sure if I'd stay. I didn't pull away. The kiss deepened, just slightly, his lips pressing more firmly into mine, his breath syncing with mine, our hearts pounding loud enough to drown out the rest of the world. When we finally pulled back, our foreheads still rested together. Josh whispered, "So that just happened." I let out a shaky laugh. "Yeah, it did." He smiled, soft and nervous and radiant. "That wasn't terrible. It was barely a kiss," I teased. He pulled back slightly, cocking an eyebrow. "Oh, you saying I should try again?" "I'm not saying it." He leaned in again, more confident this time. His lips found mine with a gentle insistence, and I felt myself melt into it into him. There was no rush, no frenzy, just a slow, quiet unfolding of something we'd both kept tucked away for too long. When we finally settled back onto the couch, his arm around my shoulders, my head against his chest, neither of us spoke for a long while. We didn't need to. His fingers traced absent lines across my forearm. My hand rested on his knee, thumb brushing softly over denim. Every now and then, he'd glance down at me and smile just a little. That kind of smile that said finally, and I'd smile back, because I knew everything was different now. Not perfect, not simple, but real. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I wasn't just hoping anymore. I was here. With him. I didn't want to sleep. Not now. Not with his arm still draped over my shoulder and his fingertips drawing slow, lazy shapes along the side of my neck. The fire was down to its final glowing embers, but the warmth between us hadn't faded. It pulsed in the quiet, steady, comforting, surreal. Josh shifted slightly, just enough to nuzzle the top of my head with his chin. You know, he murmured, for someone who overthinks everything, that kiss came pretty naturally. I rolled my eyes, grinning despite myself. I had about 8 months of practice in my head. Don't get cocky, he chuckled. You mean you imagined kissing me? I lifted my head just enough to meet his gaze. Yes, frequently, and it was a lot messier than what actually happened. Fewer firelight aesthetics, more tripping over furniture. His smile softened. I imagined it too, but I never let myself believe it'd actually happen, not like this. The honesty in his voice stilled me. He wasn't joking now, not flirting, just speaking from that part of himself I'd never fully seen before. Tonight, what held you back? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He sighed, gaze dropping to where our hands were tangled between us. I don't know. Fear, doubt. I've always had this image of who I'm supposed to be, you know? Guy with the right job, the right kind of girlfriend, the kind who smiles for holiday pictures and makes toasts at weddings. I never questioned it. And then you moved in with me, I offered, a little tease in my tone. Josh nudged me with his shoulder. Yeah, then I moved in with you, and suddenly that whole image got blurry. We fell quiet for a moment, both staring into the fire's soft glow. I could feel his heartbeat under my palm, strong and steady beneath the fabric of his t-shirt. Mine was starting to slow, to finally catching up to the calm that had settled in my chest. I don't want this to be a one-night kind of thing, I said. Not a moment we tuck away and pretend didn't happen. His brows knit slightly, then relaxed. It's not, I promise. You're sure? He pulled me closer. I'm still figuring things out. But what I am sure about is that I don't want to go back to pretending this didn't matter. That you don't matter. A beat. Also, he added, voice lightening, you're kind of stuck with me anyway. We still have one more night here, and one car with a flat tire. I laughed, letting my forehead drop against his shoulder, romantic. Nothing says new relationship like sharing a broken sleeping bag and no working flashlight. I'm making you fix that tire, first thing in the morning. You're just saying that because you don't want to walk 10 miles. No, I said, grinning. I'm saying it because you still owe me for forgetting the emergency kit. He feigned offense, gasping, are you going to hold that over my head for the rest of our relationship? My heart skipped a beat. He said relationship. I met his eyes again. Is that what this is? He nodded. If you want it to be. I reached for his hand again, this time with purpose. I do. We lay back down together, still wrapped in the same blanket, limbs intertwined now without hesitation. The weight that had sat on my chest for months, the fear, the doubt, the wondering was gone, replaced by something quiet and solid and astonishingly simple. He shifted onto his side and looked at me in the dim light. I'll probably mess up, he said softly. Say the wrong thing, overthink stuff, get weird about labels and expectations. I overthink everything too, I admitted, but maybe we just figure it out together. Yeah, he murmured, pressing his forehead against mine. Together sounds good. There was a peace in that word I hadn't expected. Together. We talked for a while longer, nothing heavy. Just soft chatter about old crushes, high school regrets, the weird way the firelight made our hands look orange and gold. He teased me for always stealing the last piece of toast. I teased him for how he never replaced the toilet paper roll. Everything felt lighter now. Not because the road ahead was easy, but because, for the first time, we weren't walking it alone. As sleep finally pulled at us, he whispered. So when we get back home, do we tell people or just keep it between us for a bit? I thought. For a moment, we take our time, I said. Do it our way. No pressure, no script. He smiled. I like that. And just before we drifted off his hand, still holding me, I felt something shift again. Not the kind that unsettles, but the kind that roots you. That tells you you're no longer standing at the edge. You're finally stepping in. By morning, the fire was out, but he was still there, his arm draped across my waist, breath slow and steady against the side of my neck. I didn't move for a long time. I just lay there, memorizing the weight of him beside me, the scratch of his stubble against my skin, the warmth that no blanket had ever given me. This wasn't a dream. And even if it had been, I wasn't ready to wake up. Eventually, the cold got us moving. We took turns splashing our faces with freezing water from the sink and laughing about how we looked like two guys who'd been lost in the woods. Which technically we kind of were. Josh wrapped a hoodie over his head and grumbled about making instant oatmeal. We sat cross-legged on the porch steps, mugs in hand, steam curling upward into the crisp morning air. The trees rustled, gold and amber under the weight of early sunlight. I think this place just earned a core memory status, Josh said, bumping my shoulder. I gave him a sideways glance. You mean flat tire, dead power, 2 beds and 1 sleeping bag? Yeah, definitely unforgettable. He laughed, but then he got quiet for a second. I watched him trace his thumb around the rim of his mug, brows furrowed, not tense, just thoughtful. You know, he said softly, when I told you I was confused, I wasn't trying to unload something heavy, I was just being honest. I didn't know how this was supposed to go. I looked down at my hands, then back up at him. There's no supposed to, Josh. We make it up as we go. He met my eyes and nodded. I want to keep making it up with you. The weight of that landed slowly like a warm coat being placed on my shoulders. Quiet, steady, a promise. Good, I said, voice almost a whisper, because I'm not ready for this to end when we drive back. He reached out and took my hand just like that, no nerves this time, no subtle brushes or accidental grazes, just his fingers wrapped around mine, firm and certain. There was something about that gesture, right there on the porch, with sunlight bleeding into the treetops and the whole world yawning awake around us. Something real, grounded. A week ago, the idea of us had only lived in my head, a maybe, a hope. Now it was here, living, breathing, gripping my hand like it wasn't afraid anymore. After breakfast, we packed up the car. The tire, by some miracle, held enough air to get us to the nearest gas station. We laughed too much during the drive, mostly about Nathiam singing badly to every song, me pretending not to be impressed when he guessed the lyrics. But somewhere, on that road, a new rhythm began to settle between us. It was in the way we touched without hesitation, his hand resting on my knee, my fingers brushing his hair out of his eyes when the wind got wild with the windows down. It was in the way we paused at red lights and looked at each other, smiling like idiots because we finally could. By the time we reached our apartment, the late afternoon sun was pouring through the windows like golden syrup. Familiar furniture, same old clutter, but it felt different now. We didn't unpack right away. We stood in the kitchen, staring at the mess we'd left behind, empty coffee mugs, a half-finished bag of chips, the laundry basket we never touched. Josh turned to me with that crooked grin. We should probably clean this place, eventually, I said. Or we could just move. He laughed, shaking his head. Let's not start a joint mortgage just yet. We survived 3 days in a cabin, let's take that win. Fair enough. Then, just before he turned away, he paused, fished into his pocket and pulled out something small. That it was a matchbook, from the cabin's fireplace. I took it before we left, he said, a little sheepish. Thought maybe one day, when we forget how this started, we'll find it again. I stared at it for a beat, my chest tightening in the best way. He handed it to me, and I turned it over in my fingers. One charred edge, one unused match still inside. I'm keeping this, I said. He nodded, then leaned in and kissed me. Not a first kiss. Not an unsure one, just a real one. When he pulled back, he whispered, "We've got a lot to figure out, don't we?" "Yeah," I said, "but I think we've got time." We didn't make grand declarations. We didn't need to. We just made dinner together, arguing over the best pasta sauce. We watched an old movie on the couch, his head on my lap. We paused it 5 times to talk about nothing, and somewhere between the boiled noodles and the second-hand popcorn bowl, we started writing the next part of our story. There would be questions. There would be labels to sort out. Maybe awkward conversations with friends and family. But that night, as I stood brushing my teeth beside him, our shoulders bumping in the mirror's reflection, I caught his eye. He smiled through the foam. I smiled back, and just like that, I knew this wasn't the end of something complicated. It was the beginning of something simple, something honest, something that mattered.